to today's show. My name is Spencer Walsh. Thank you so much for joining us here today. We are back today for a 3-show a week this week. Newsflash, we got a Monday, Tuesday, and Thursday show in the plan for you. We got some very, very interesting situations going on right now at the moment. Going on all pretty much concurrently. We got, one day away before probably the most boring election I've ever seen. The most boring consequential election I've ever seen, with Raphael Warnock battling Herschel Walker in the Georgia Senate runoff. There is some sort of a debate. Raphael Warnock may win, although it definitely seem like people are just kind of assuming that Raphael Warnock is kind of assumed to win. Well, Herschel Walker definitely, I think he's not worth counting out, just because Georgia Republicans are, pretty strong in number, and you never know quite what can happen, but it does look good for Warnock in the moment. We'll give you the preview. We'll see you how young Georgians are playing a role, and how they may or may not be ensuring they'll get some kind of political payment for their hard work. Now, 2 straight election cycles turning that state blue, and way before anyone thought it could be. And yes, believe it or not, it wasn't all Stacey Abrams. But anyway, we will take a look at the wake of the railroad fallout. Andrew Perez has a story in the Lever about how Joe Biden betrayed rail workers. We'll take a look at how Jared Kushner took a little bit of an L at the World Cup in Qatar, and how Bernie and Biden are back at loggerheads over South Carolina, just like we never left. All right. Yeah, it's gonna be a fun, if slightly PTSD-inducing story to do there at the end. But we start today at the top with Raphael Warnock and Herschel Walker. In the final day before Georgia Senate runoff, Raphael Warnock pleaded with supporters to tune out pundits predicting his victory and instead vote like it's an emergency in a bitterly contested race that is closing out on the midterm election cycle. To a certain extent, it would be 50-50. We're going to see a Republican House. We're going to see essentially just even more chaos and gridlock in Washington after, the result of these midterms. Just, chaos in the Republican caucus. Democrats, likely going to be, pretty unified, kind of almost scared straight behind Nancy Pelosi, really unable to do that. Or, sorry, not even Nancy Pelosi anymore. It's going to be Hakeem Jeffries, essentially the same thing. But that to me really shows you, the chaos that's going on in this moment, and what more, the cherry on top of the chaos cake coming into January when this new Congress takes its seat, would be Herschel Walker, and you definitely could see a scenario where, just as Warnock's talking about, people get confident, people get too cocky. They're like, okay, it's not going to be that big of a deal. And they just, a certain amount of people in the Atlanta and the suburbs of Atlanta decide to stay home, and then Herschel Walker kind of glides through to victory. So he was obviously former football star recruited into the race by former President Donald J. Trump. He made a circuit of North Georgia counties. He easily won a month ago, urging Republicans who have avoided early voting to hit the polls on Tuesday, saying, quote, "Gotta get out the vote." The two men are vying in an election with major symbolic as well as practical ramifications. Warnock victory would deliver Democrats a 51st vote in the Senate, where the party for the past 2 years has relied on Vice President Kamala Harris to break 50-50 ties. If Walker wins, Republicans would maintain joint control of the Senate committees, and 2 centrist Democratic senators, Joe Manchin of West Virginia and Kristen Sinema of Arizona, would maintain effective veto power over all legislation in the chamber. Now it could just only be one of them. Now only one of them has to be kind of the poison chalice, so to speak, with the John Fetterman pickup, or the rotating villain, I think is the term, not the poison chalice. Joe Manchin of West Virginia and Kristen Sinema would kind of be trading off. But the broader political stakes are just as significant. Democrats believe a victory would deliver proof they had transformed Georgia into an indisputable battleground, heralding a new era of Sunbelt politics and reshaping their strategies for winning the White House. A Walker victory after his racist troubled campaign and the GOP's clean sweep in statewide races this year would reassert Republican dominance in the state. It would really be kind of remarkable if, in a big repudiation, in a big boost, big time, to the Donald Trump wing of the party, and a kind of big blow to the DeSantis wing, who are kind of really crowing after their midterm success recently, and just kind of being like, there is no future. There's no future for the Democratic Party. There's no future for Trump and the Republican Party. Just check the scoreboard, as DeSantis so kind of smugly said on that, the Wednesday morning after the midterms, when Trump was going after him. But if Warnock gets through here, that will be enough for Donald Trump to come in and say, hey, this is still a fight. This is something you still got to keep seriously. Warnock's going to be an incredible force for chaos in the party, a force for kind of the quote unquote Trump agenda. He's really kind of a true Trump candidate, in that he will literally just do, I feel like, anything that anyone frankly tells him to do. I mean, Walker is not even essentially allowed on TV without either Lindsey Graham or Ted Cruz by his side. He's just someone who, by all accounts and purposes, seems to be suffering from some sort of CTE. So it is kind of sad, without a doubt, to see him kind of going through the situation. But he's not someone who just particularly is dangerous or evil in any way. Just someone who just really, just not all there. It seems very unfortunately. So. Yeah, and for Trump, who 3 weeks ago began his third presidential campaign, again, Tuesday's contest represents his last chance to claim victory in a battleground for one of his closest political acolytes. So, yeah. More than $380 million has been spent on the race, the most of any election this year. According to Open Secrets, a group that tracks money in politics, the runoff was prompted when neither candidate received 50% of the vote in last month's general election, and the number of early votes has topped 1.89 million, about half the turnout on November 8th. Both campaigns believe the group skews heavily Democratic, and Republicans involved and allied with Walker acknowledged that the tilt left the candidate was needing to win. The tilt left the candidate needing to win about 60% of the in-person vote on Tuesday to catch up. He won about 56% of the election day vote in November, according to data from the Georgia Secretary of State office. So he will need to do a little bit better than that this time. And again, with the kind of momentum being the way it is, and how things have asserted themselves post the kind of Democrats doing better than expected, this kind of same feeling is kind of expected to apply with the 50-50 situation already being settled. The advantage of the incumbency, the advantage of normalcy that Warnock is going to win. The assumption that Warnock is going to win, I think that may play against him, but everything else is definitely playing in his favor. There's still a path for Herschel Walker to win this race. He still could win, Warnock told reporters after speaking to supporters on Georgia Tech on Monday. We had a massive lead during the general, and so we know that there are differences in how people show up when they vote in the state. And so if there's anything I'm worried about, is that people think that we don't need their voice. We do, he says. So let's go behind the scenes here a little bit. This is in the American Prospect by Gabrielle Gurley. So she writes, while dubious commentators concluded that young people would sit out the midterms, the Center for Information and Research on Civic Learning and Engagement, or Circle, at Tufts University had identified Georgia as the top state where the youth vote would be decisive. Typical Tufts making a egregiously long and wordy and mouthful acronym just to have a cool ending like that. But anyway, so Circle, this think tank on civic learning, has said this is going to be the top state where the youth vote is going to be decisive. In the tight general election contest between Senator Raphael Warnock and Herschel Walker, 63% of the young people had cast their vote for Warnock and 36% went with Walker. Some pollsters have doubted the Georgia youth surge, but it does seem clear that twice as many young people in the state voted compared to 2014, and the youth vote kept up with the overall intense increase in turnout in Georgia, in addition to becoming more democratic. Youth vote remains a critical factor, one that Democrats hope will give Warnock the edge when polls close next Tuesday on the final day of runoff voting. The contest promises to be as close as last year's runoff between Warnock and Senator Kelly Loeffler to serve out the remainder of Senator Johnny Isakson's term. Isakson, who had been in poor health, resigned at the end of the 2019 term and died 2 years later. So Ruby Bell Booth, Circle's election coordinator, pointed out that when young people step up when they know their vote matters, step up when they know that their vote matters. And I think that's a very, very important point. Like these groups, they are not particularly disconnected from politics. They just, I think, they're not making a, specifically conscious effort to tune things out, to turn things away. They're saying, I'm going to start tuning in when politics works for me. And for young people, politics has worked the least. Old people vote the most because politics works the most for them. They know they can make a difference. They know their vote matters and their vote will be respected. And you can see how that slowly, drops off with millennials, gets even worse with Gen Z. And that kind of shows you that really does show you that they are, really starting to get the sense that there is a political connection between, my vote and actually getting to it, actually mattering. Gen Z, I think in a big way, they're not seeing their vote mattering. They're not, they hear all the time, they see all the time politics and government failing in the sense that, we keep electing, even with Democratic and Republican people, when we put them in power, nothing substantial, nothing super significant seems to change. So I think that, and getting people out there and excited and motivated to vote, it's crucial for any part of politics, and I think so many people just don't get that. So, they think they get it, but when it comes down to, they're always going to be like, why didn't these people vote for us? They're just this. They're bad. They don't get how good we are. That is the super common, almost instinctual reflex that so many people, especially more establishment-minded people, have in politics. And I think it is so wrong-headed because, if you cater to people, if you give them a reason to care, they will care. We're seeing that with young people in Georgia here in a big way. And Raphael Warnock is about to, I think, find it out 2 times in a row here. So curbing the youth political power is one of the reasons why Georgia's Republican lawmakers came up with SB 202, a hornet's nest of voting laws designed to suppress turnout people of color, young whites, and older white Democrats in major metro areas. The nuisance measures, slashing the number of ballot drop boxes, reducing the runoff timeline from 8 weeks to 28 days, sowing confusion around provisional and absentee ballot use, and more, are all designed to make voting an exquisite exercise in inconvenience, at least for anyone who is not a white conservative Republican. And these measures, they are geographically targeted to do that. But it doesn't seem to work. Young people have overwhelmingly cast their ballots for Democratic candidates, and in the 2022 general election vote, shows that issues like abortion, climate, income inequality, and the LGBTQ rights, rather than sense of civic duty that sends many older voters to the polls, galvanize young people. So I think, that is something that was always, I think it's almost like, I think older people have this kind of sense of politics as a matter of faith. Like, if you keep voting, if you keep going and support the people that you support without any questions, politics will eventually work for you and get better. And for them, they're absolutely right, because their priorities they're largely more right-wing priorities, are borne out when they do continue to go out and go vote. When Democrats vote, for example, in 2008, they voted. Young people voted on unprecedented measures. I think that really scarred people in a big way when a lot of that stuff that they thought was coming was not borne out. And that assumption that generated a whole host of kind of loyal Democratic voters just did not carry through. Republican voters, in the past, did not, when the Democrats had their chance to, I think, really engender a lot of, kind of brand loyalty. That completely failed. That completely just did not work. And instead, it just generated a lot of brand skepticism. Like, it has to be, are these people going to stick for what I care about? Not the assumption that if these people get in power, they will stick by what I care about. The assumption there, the trust is just not there on the Democratic side when it is with these kind of conservative, reactionary, right-wing voters that, really do obviously make up the GOP's base. So Alex Ames, the Georgia Youth Justice Coalition's Gen Z War Room Director, knew what she was up against. The Georgia Tech student had to weigh voting against 4 final exams that she had next Tuesday, the last day to vote in the runoff. Last weekend, she voted early, waiting for more than an hour to vote at her campus polling place. Such hurdles can be too much for others. It's really concerning to hear young voters who pay attention, like my friends who are politically engaged, still be really confused as to how to vote. She says Friday is the last day for early voting, and anyone who did not make it to the polls this week could find really long lines next Tuesday in these kind of areas where, in the Georgia Tech area, like polling places have been cut. You're seeing these big drop-offs in resources to process the electorate in those areas, these known Democratic areas, and that is intentional. The runoff vote is essentially a ferocious turnout battle. Voters in reliably Democratic Republican places are breaking early voting records statewide. In the Savannah area, early voting has already surpassed general election turnout. Republicans are particularly interested in populous metro Atlanta Republican counties like Hall and Forsyth. But it is a little too facile to conclude that Republican turnout may be depressed without the Senate majority in play. It may be that Republican voters want to crown the GOP a sweep of statewide offices with a Senate victory, one that would compensate for the Democrats retaining control of the U.S. Senate. And those outside the region often forget that Chris Crom, the Institute for Southern Studies executive director, calls an uneasy alliance in the Southern Republican politics between the corporate establishment and the religious right that now includes a Trumpist base that dominates the primary season and produces candidates like Walker. So if that, the big question is obviously the normalcy question. Will that, the same trends apply, or will turnout, if will the same kind of trends of we want a sane person, we want Democrats in control, we want some sort of, we want to have, frankly, a normal person in control. Will those same trends apply, or will just turnout go down slightly and Herschel Walker sneak into the Senate? We will see. But in that case, it's still going to be close no matter what. We spent already way too much time talking about this election. We'll talk about some rail workers in just a minute. My name is Spencer Walsh. This is the Spencer Walsh Radio Network, and if you're listening to one of our podcasts, whether it's Newsflash, Hidden History, The Spencer Walsh Show, or something else, ladies and gentlemen, we have one simple request of you. Please be sure to rate us, subscribe to us if you like us, and leave us a comment, because just like all of you, sometimes we need that feedback in our lives, good or bad. We want to hear what you have to say. So please do those steps. Make SWR content better. And thank you so much for listening. All right, ladies and gentlemen, let's get on to our next story. We have this really kind of great piece around the railroad here, and Andrew Perez in the Lever writing about this. Rob Colfax is always at the mercy of the railroad. His wife, Mona, puts it. Our life only functions around the railroad, she says. As a longtime conductor for the BNSF Railway, Colfax is virtually always on call. He must be ready to get to work within 90 minutes from when the company says they need him, which can happen at any time, day or night. The family lives 45 minutes away from the terminal in La Crosse, Wisconsin, that serves as his home base. He spends a lot of time away in hotels at Chicago, Galesburg, and in Galesburg, Illinois. So he pretty much has to be 90 minutes. He has to be there, get ready to work within 90 minutes from when the company sends him an email. So he just has to drop everything he's doing within 90 minutes. So he's at his son's football game or whatever, and then he gets the call from the company, get to work in 90 minutes. He's just got to drop everything and go, and the family lives, again, 45 minutes away from that terminal. So Colfax says the demands on his time have gotten worse over the years. The industry shedding jobs to cut costs as part of its so-called precision-scheduled railroading strategy. The situation, he said, has become unbearable since BNSF has planted a new points-based attendance policy under which employees can be disciplined or fired for missing a call to come into work or taking an unplanned day off. So this precision-based scheduling is pretty much essentially, let's give all power to the railroad leaders. Let's give all power to the companies to schedule at the most inconvenient time, give them the most power over our lives that we want. Of course, that's something that they really agreed to, but was kind of forced on them by the management. So they want us to be available for duty 95% of the time now, 24/7, 365. I tried to plan for doctor's appointments and other things, but it's almost impossible. Sometimes you just have to lay off and take the hit on the points. Which is really kind of tough, and because obviously you get penalized, you get these points taken off, or these points added to your kind of quota of you took this time off, you did this kind of unplanned doctor's appointment, or even if you planned it, even if you gave them good notice, that's still going to count on your time, and you are still going to not be paid for missing. So. Lack of paid sick time afforded to workers was at the center of the high-stakes labor dispute between unions and giant railroad companies that came to a head this past week. through more than 3 years of contract negotiations, the railroad flatly refused to budge and give workers any paid sick days. The company knew they did not really have to negotiate because politicians in Washington wouldn't risk allowing. So pretty much essentially what they don't have is a union, because you don't have a union if you can't go on strike and withhold your labor. That's why you organize. If Congress is just willing to step in, they're busting and they're destroying the ability of these railroad workers to have a union. Because the whole point of union is you're organized, you're paying your dues in case you go on strike for better working conditions and withhold your labor. Due to laws from the 1920s, Congress has made sure that they cannot happen. So, especially at this time, the railroad has been just getting away with murder, ever since then. I believe this happened again or in the past, in the 1990s, where they just said, you know what, we are shutting down any kind of hope, any kind of assumption, or any kind of, wish that you may have for making any kind of decisive collective action on your situation, because we can't risk the horror, the calamity of any kind of railroad, severe work labor stoppage on the railroads, because that would be, it legitimately would be. Imagine if all the trains stopped working, food prices, shipping, all that stuff going up very, very high, very, very fast. And that's because the railroad company, the freight industry, that is something that is a very, very important commodity. And that obviously is why, by extension, the workers in that industry are going to have a lot of power. And when they have a lot of power, when they supposedly have a lot of power in a union, they think that they're able to use it, but Congress, by, pretty much with the ability they gave themselves to impose deals on the rail sector, has taken away that power from them. So essentially, they're not an organized workforce because they can't withhold their labor. So that kind of goes on and talk about the Colfax situation. So President Joe Biden's administration first intervened in the labor dispute this summer, convening an emergency board to broker a recommended deal that included just one paid sick day for rail workers. Last week, at Biden's urging, Congress passed a law to block a strike and impose the administration's labor deal over worker objections. 55% of the unionized workforce voted it down. A measure offered by progressives to add 76 days sick days to the deal won some Republican support, but still failed in the corporate-controlled Senate. But, as the story of Colfax and his family demonstrates, the number of sick days granted to rail workers and the way politicians just help railroad barons railroad them isn't just some political issue. The matter strikes at the systematic devaluing of people who literally keep the country rolling, who have seen their benefits deteriorate and their schedules get far more extreme as railroad companies have decimated the workforce to juice corporate profits and executive payouts. Colfax wishes the lawmakers who voted down the sick leave proposal last week would take the time to learn more about the railroad lifestyle in order to balance what's best for businesses and the economy with the needs of rail workers who sacrifice to make the economy run. If lawmakers spent more time working on the railroads, Colfax wages, they'd be more than happy to go back home to Congress. He and Mona said they both voted for Biden in the 2020 campaign based on his promises to be pro-labor. Colfax clarified he would never consider voting for Trump. He voted for Senator Elizabeth Warren in the Democratic primary. And Mona, smart, said she voted for Bernie Sanders of Vermont. But Colfax, who said he voted to strike several times at the contract negotiation process, told the lever after the Senate, after the Senate vote, he felt betrayed by those he helped put in power. Biden lost a big chance to set himself from the Republicans, he said. Set himself apart from the Republicans, he said. That is a big failure on his part. I think he's really right. It's a really kind of awful chance. Literally, it's not a big thing that Biden would have. It wouldn't have been anything, systematically revolutionary or whatever. It would have been saying, hey, let's just, the railroads just stop the blatant, rapid exploitation. Just slow down that exploitation that you're doing of your workforce and decimating of your workforce and automation of the entire industry. Slow that down just a little bit so that we can give these people at least a week off of paid sick leave. A week off in one of the most important industries in this country. These people do not even have a week off. Biden was the most pro-labor president, was unwilling to say, we are going to get up in your faces, impose this deal on you, railroad companies, you, and not the railroad workers. We're going to give them a little extra something and, give them an actual deal that they can support and, actually stand up to these rail companies. They've had some big donations in the Senate in the past. That's obviously why, it worked there. But it just shows you just blatant unwillingness by Joe Biden to go against the status quo, even in an area where it's just so bad, really clearly already. Which I think is quite remarkable. We haul anything and everything, said Colfax. Intermodal, mixed freight, and commodities, military trains, vehicle trains, you name it. If something goes on a rail car at some point or another, I've probably been on a train with it. As for the ins and outs of the job, Colfax says, I'm responsible for the paperwork of the train, doing any work that's associated with the train, like setups, pickups, or if there's any troubles. If the train breaks down in two, if the train breaks into or goes into an emergency because the air hose separates or anything like that, I'm responsible for putting it back together. His duties include overseeing train makeup and compliance, and placement of cars to ensure weight is distributed properly. His duties include overseeing train makeup and compliance. And jobs, that is going to really involve a lot of walking, often on unsteady surfaces in all kinds of weather conditions, followed by long periods of waiting around. After shifts last up to 12 hours, Colfax says he's either brought back to his home terminal or to a motel, where he then takes a 10.5-hour rest period. The rest periods often occur and end at odd times, which can make it difficult to find food. So Colfax usually travels with a large insulated lunch container and enough food to get through a trip. The demands on Colfax's time and the unpredictable nature of his schedule means that he and Mona lead separate lives. My life is separate from Rob, she said. I love him so much, and I want to do things with him. We can't. We don't have a life together where we have nights out with friends. We can't join a bowling league. There's so many things we can't do. Our grandsons play hockey. We have not been to a hockey game for our grandsons. Over time, Colfax says he's seen his benefits get worse as part of a broader shift in how management treats the workers. I've never complained about the pay, he said. When I first started out, we had excellent health insurance. We didn't have to pay anything monthly subsidies for it or anything, he said. In 2008, he only had to pay $20 after getting carpal tunnel surgery done on both wrists, saying it's only been downhill from here. Now Colfax says he's paying about $250 each month for a family insurance plan that covers his wife, while a surgery ends up costing $4,000 or $5,000 out of pocket. Colfax and the railroad companies used to show more gratitude for workers, providing them hot meals, particularly on holidays, or giving them gift cards they could use at the BNSF store. All that stuff's gone by the wayside, he said. Last year I was down in Galesburg, Illinois for Thanksgiving, Christmas, and New Year's Eve, and there's nothing at the hotel saying, come to the depot, we have food here for you. That was how much gratification there was to show us thanks for working on the holidays. Colfax said it's increasingly anti-labor from BNSF management, and frankly, they literally said, in the kind of presidential emergency board that they presented their case to Biden for why they should be able to pay workers nothing and get whatever they want. They said they maintain that their profit has come solely from capital investment and risk taking on the part of management, and not at all from labor. So it's no wonder they're going to give these little pigs food. They don't respect them. They simply do not respect them, and it is really, really a tragedy that Joe Biden, the supposed most pro-labor president in United States history, has just had nothing to say or do about it. People like Colfax, people like all the union workers across the country that just, really, I hope over the future, just what needs to happen is a systematic retaking of these unions, making them political muscle, a political force worth fighting for, and expanding the power of these unions so that when the time comes that there are leaders in rank and file in place who are both bold enough to take the strike action when it really counts and when it's really uncomfortable. And that, I think, is how you really get some serious wins and concessions. All right, let's get to our next story. This is kind of a fun one by Robert Mackey in The Intercept. It's not clear from Ivanka Trump's Instagram record of her family's 3-day visit to the World Cup in Qatar if she or her husband Jared Kushner heard many of the chanter songs in support of Palestinians voiced by Arab fans at multiple venues during the first round of matches. But the outpouring of support, which was expressed by huge Free Palestine banners displayed in the stands and by fans who intruded on Israeli television interviews to wave Palestinian flags and berate Israeli reporters, made it clear how badly Kushner had miscalculated. As his father-in-law, Donald Trump's Middle East peace envoy, when he convinced a handful of Arab autocrats to sign economic cooperation deals with Israel that did not respect the rights of Palestinians. So pretty much, doing something that a lot of these really disconnected autocratic people who rule without the support of the people in their country, at least on this issue, have just kind of been systematically shut out and ignored. Those relations were formalized by Jared Kushner, and we really saw, I think, in a big way, what people felt about that in the end and in the World Cup, in all these interviews with various Israeli reporters. Here, this is a
Palestine! 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 Palestine!
So there you have it.
Palestine!
A chance of Palestine over an Israeli reporter doing a piece
Palestine!
to camera. And I think that, that really does show you exactly what's happening. Hours after 5 Palestinians were killed in the occupied West Bank, Arab fans of the World Cup in Qatar chanted in Arabic with spirit and blood, "We will redeem you, O Palestine." On the TV broadcast, apparently it came through loud and clear.
الجماهير بيرددوا بالروح بالدم نفديك يا فلسطين. الله أكبر الله أكبر. نفديك يا فلسطين بالروح بالدم نفديك يا فلسطين بالروح بالدم نفديك يا فلسطين. الله أكبر الله أكبر.
In his own breaking history, Kushner claims to have orchestrated a true turning point in history when 5 Muslim-majority countries, the UAE, Bahrain, Kosovo, Morocco, and Sudan, signed peace agreements with Israel. According to Kushner, whose agenda seemed to be dictated from the start by his old family friend Benjamin Netanyahu, the agreements he brokered with nations that were never central to the conflict have the potential to bring about the complete end of the Arab-Israeli conflict that has existed ever since the founding of the State of Israel. Despite Kushner's inflated claims, it was clear from the start that there was little public support in the Arab world for any nation to make peace with Israel, while millions of Palestinians still live under Israeli military rule. Survey data from 2020, when Morocco agreed to sign the deal in exchange for the Trump administration's recognizing of the kingdom's sovereignty over this former Spanish colony of the Western Sahara, showed that 88% of Moroccans rejected diplomatic recognition of Israel. Polls conducted in the same year showed that 89% of Tunisians and 88% of Qataris agreed that the Palestinian cause concerns all Arabs. Just 6% of Saudis surveyed said they would support recognition of Israel, even though they're best friends and they both want to kind of turn on Iran. At least in MBS and Netanyahu maybe the people still are very, very concerned about the aggression of Israel in the region. Although they probably have nothing to worry about as long as MBS continues to get in bed with them. Like kind of the I can't even speak today. Autocratic axis is kind of what I meant to say. You get the MBS Netanyahu kind of very aggressive, very disrespectful of human rights. Not to say that the Qataris or the UAE people are very respectful either. But we support them. We prop them up all the same. But this. It really shows the conditions in the Arab world, at least on the ground. I think, the World Cup, there's no true, polling, and it's definitely not, obviously an expression of the political sentiment, how close things are to actually making some kind of political change in the region. Obviously not, but it is still fun to see kind of these moments of people chanting from all these countries that Jared Kushner, while he was there, was so sure that he had turned the charts of history. It's so clear. It's so cool to see, at least, that the people know what's up. So these are some Morocco fans chanting in Arabic, or singing in Arabic about the Me Too. Obviously, resist for Palestine, broad support for a continued boycott of Israel was clear when the tournament kicked off, and social networks were flooded with videos of fans from across the Arab world rejecting that Emiratis' own tentative step towards normalizing relations with Israel, its decision to allow the Israeli journalists to report on the tournament. So, this is a pretty big deal. The fact that they let in Israeli reporters into Arab country where they were very unpopular, as we saw in that poll. Here's how that went.
Hello. Where are you from? from Qatar.
Oh!
Okay, just let me to check.
As you can see,
Which channel?
אבל כששמע מאיפה אנחנו, ברגע אחד ירד לו כל החשק לדבר איתנו.
he's
We are
saying
the
when I
public
found
broadcaster from Israel.
For what?
Israel.
You are from Israel?
Yeah. Is it okay?
No,
Why?
because
What's your name?
Mohsen.
Mohsen. What do you do for living? Like,
Actually, I don't want to.
No.
Interview. Thanks.
so just
yeah, so there you go. That was kind of the reaction. It was a very, very kind of a clear stance on the normalization from pretty much everyone who, we saw a lot of, kind of Israeli interviews, just many, like 15 plus various clips I've seen since the World Cup started a week and a half, 2 weeks ago. And a lot of people just kind of coming out and saying that, no, sorry, I don't want to talk to you. I'm good. We can move on, please. Or just straight up chanting in the camera, Palestine, Palestine. So yeah, this is another interesting one.
مرحبا اهلا شو اخبارك الحمد لله انت من لبنان انا من اسرائيل يا اخي انت من
He's saying I'm Israeli, and then they walk away, and he goes, wait, one more thing, it's Palestine. Anyway, so the fact that even fans of Morocco, one of the 5 nations that signed Kushner's Abrahamic Accords, were unwilling to appear on Israeli TV, seemed to baffle one Israeli reporter. Which is kind of funny. It's like, we have peace, he said. But the journalist yelled as the Moroccan fans walked off and shouted support for Palestine. You signed the peace agreement.
We are from Israel. Israel. Yeah. Hey, new friends. What? We have peace.
Israel no Palestinian. Israel no Palestinian.
But
Yeah, so you're saying Israel, no, Palestine, yeah. And that kind of shows you, I think, it's obviously clear where the Arab world stands on Palestinian rights. They're, fully 100% behind the Palestinians. I think that is really clear, despite what, autocratic interests of the Arab world may say. But I think really what this episode shows is that democracy is only really going to exist for certain amounts of people. It's not going to exist for the millions of people who want to free Palestine in the Arab world. It's only going to exist for a certain amount of Israelis who are going to kind of lord the fact that they hold democratic elections that fundamentally take away people's human rights all the time, and they only obviously allow certain people to vote within Israeli territory, or what they would like to be Israeli territory. They're going to hold that over people. They're going to claim that they're the only true democratic nation, while really ignoring a lot of democratic will in other countries, and getting you to believe, or trying to get you to believe things that aren't true. So what I would say is, don't fall for it, and look at some of the polling, look at some of the data, and I think you would get a much better picture. All right, it is now time. We are getting into the drama, the moment that we kind of have all been waiting for to a certain extent. This is always good. Bernie Sanders' 2020 campaign manager is back in the news, and he's Fauci here. He is feuding with Joe Biden over South Carolina. That is who coincidentally Joe Biden has decided to make number 1 at the top of the calendar next primary cycle. Iowa is out. No more Iowa caucuses going first on the Democratic side. It is now South Carolina. And I think this is, it's a little bit comical because Joe Biden, I think it's very clear to anyone looking at it objectively, it's clear to see what Joe Biden's trying to do there. He obviously has a very, very strong political base. I should say Jim Clyburn has a very strong political base in South Carolina that he, frankly, just handed on a silver platter to Jim Clyburn. And that, despite what popular imagination would have you believe, it's not simply just black voters. It is also a huge percentage of rich, white South Carolina Democrats that really like the status quo politics that Joe Biden and Jim Clyburn represent. And you can see that from the results of the 2020 South Carolina primary, which is, by the way, something a lot of people who are really happy about that result did not or do not like to talk about. Fauci here pretty much essentially points this out in the op-ed and saying, it's clear to see what Joe Biden's doing. I think, they also moved up California too, just in case Kamala Harris needs a little bit of a boost in the calendar early. Shakir pretty aggressively called Biden's proposal comical if it weren't tragic. In an interview a few hours after the piece was published, he added that putting South Carolina first was a fatal flaw in Biden's plan and an obvious slap in the face to our good sense. Yeah, and of course, here we get the belly aching. We get the massive amounts of just hand wringing and all really incredibly disingenuous hand wringing over this remark from Faz Shakir, because now he's a racist or something. So zero tolerance, zero for any disrespect or dismissal of black voters. Democratic National Committee Chairman Jamie Harrison wrote on Twitter while retweeting a similar critique. Patrick Dillon, a Democratic strategist whose wife Jen O'Malley Dillon is Biden's deputy chief of staff, tweeted Shakir's piece with a comment. Had to read this twice just to confirm that it does not mention black voters even once. Shakir, in our interview, was unmoved by his critics, saying, quote, "It's a very insulting approach to suggest that somehow we don't care about black voters because we think that South Carolina shouldn't go first. Come on, get real." He added that he'd support Georgia going first, pointing out that it is more diverse and has a higher percentage of black voters than South Carolina. He would rather see Nevada at the head of the pack, but would prefer any of the other first five in Biden's plan, which also includes New Hampshire, Michigan, and Georgia, states that Biden happens to be strong in, to go first over South Carolina. And again, yeah, they're trying to go, but so many black voters in South Carolina, you don't care about their opinion at all. Like this is the tack that they're taking. This is how low they're literally willing to stoop to kind of go after the left here. It is really kind of remarkable to see, and it's like we don't clearly see what's going on. We don't clearly see right in front of our eyes going. It's like if Bernie Sanders won the election and started to put Nevada first and said, Democrats clearly don't care about Latino voters, which maybe they should put Nevada first, because, by the way, I don't know if you've seen, but Democrats are not doing so well with Latino voters recently. But yeah, that is another kind of like diversity argument, just so disingenuous and so clear as to what Bernie Sanders is doing. By the way, the Democratic Party is kind of more to the left in Nevada too. And if Bernie Sanders had done that, if Bernie Sanders had tried to put Nevada first, all these same people would have been absolutely apoplectic at him the other way around. So, there you have it. You just can't win. It is a political, like, they will take any news events and spin that, frankly, for political will or political benefit. So, anyway, while Shakir's insisted his pushback against South Carolina was not for strategic intent of Bernie or anyone else, I think that's it's kind of a dumb hypothetical, given that Bernie probably shouldn't also run again. He's not exactly a disinterested party. Of course, South Carolina turned a tide against Sanders in 2020. Shakir in April penned a memo stating that Sanders had not ruled out another presidential run if Biden bows out. The South Carolina first primary would not be ideal for Sanders' 2024 candidacy. Shakir believes that Biden will run, but that Sanders' position hadn't changed. If Biden were not to run, then all options are on the table, he said. He said that he gave Sanders a heads up about the op-ed beforehand. I think he had concerns about the calendar as well, Shakir said, but added he did not want to speak for the senator. So, regardless of intention, Biden's proposal had prompted the first political fight of the 2024 primary. Many Democrats, including progressives like Representative Ro Khanna, have come out in favor of the proposal already, which the DNC will vote on in Philadelphia in early February. But Shakir is among a number of Democrats who are beginning to push back on the official vote. Democrats from New Hampshire, which would see its treasured First Nation status disappear, have been especially critical. Jeanne Shaheen even snubbed the president's invitation to the White House Congressional Ball Monday night, as Punchhole reported. The president's team has tried to quell potential objections by saying the plan only applies to 2024 and can be revisited again before 2028. And on Friday, the DNC panel changed the reordering presidential calendar by codifying a process to review the earliest dates ahead of 2028. So kind of just making sure people were more chill. But again, love to get a little bit on the kind of infighting between these two really just insufferable sides that, frankly, the 2016 primary will never end, and frankly should never end until one side is victorious, because that's how political fights work. But anyway, screw South Carolina and the South Carolina Democratic Party. It frankly, will never seem to die. As Jim Clyburn, he even today suggested that Kevin McCarthy should be made Speaker with Democratic votes. I mean, this guy is, I just don't know if he's for real sometimes, but, the next day he never retracts it, always doubles down, and he's just Jim Clyburn, South Carolina Democrats, really something special. All right, that's all the time I got for you guys today. Thank you so much for joining us. Be back tomorrow.